Final Fantasy XVI is the newest mainline installment in the franchise, and as with every Final Fantasy game that's released in the past few years, comes some controversy. Is this entry truly a real Final Fantasy game? Or has the franchise abandoned all its roots in favor of something different? Let us dissect the issue and more as we delve into my raw thoughts on Final Fantasy XVI. Hello everybody, my name is Michang, and today we're going to be talking about Final Fantasy XVI. Now, I just finished the game a little while ago, and I have some thoughts to share, but there's not going to be really a script for this. It's just unfiltered, raw thoughts, and it's probably going to get a little ranty at some point, so be prepared for that. I'm going to be speaking largely in general at first, just in case you haven't played the game and you just want a little bit of a sneak peek to what someone's thoughts on Final Fantasy XVI might be. And as we get later into the video, I'll be talking about more spoiler-ridden content, so be prepared for that, and I'll make sure to give a big warning before any of that happens, just in case you want to watch this video and you haven't played the game. And at some point, I'm sure I'll get something very wrong, so if I do, please be sure to let me know in the comment section down below. But if I had to describe Final Fantasy XVI in one word, I would pick spectacle, because that is truly where the game really shines. The presentation of the story, the set pieces, the world of Valisthea, it's done so well. The cutscenes are well directed, the boss fights are majestic, cinematic masterpieces. I feel like that sounds like it's way over the top, but when I say this, I'm not speaking lightly. Like, when I say cinematic masterpieces, I say that where every major boss feels like it would be the final boss in just about any other game. I swear to God, some of those set pieces and locations, they go really fucking hard, man. The culmination of the story, the action, the characters all coming together in this neat little package. And I think everything that it tries to do, it does very well. Starting with the story, let's say it reminds you very quickly that this is going to be an M-rated Final Fantasy game. The atmosphere is definitely a lot more grim than I would say most Final Fantasy games that I've played have been. Setting is grim, everything seems to be falling apart, the world is just in shambles generally, but I still gotta say it still has that Final Fantasy charm. I don't really know how to explain it into words. It's kind of like I always associate this sort of campiness with Final Fantasy. Like, it's obviously, you know, there's a lot of shit, Final Fantasy's always had some crazy shit going down. There's some world-ending stakes, something terrible is going to happen, everything's going to explode, but, you know, there is still a lightheartedness about it, and I think even though despite the surface level layering of Final Fantasy XVI having this dark exterior, it still has that Final Fantasy-ness, I guess, within the world and the characters in the story. I'm trying not to be too specific here. It's really hard to talk about certain things without getting into spoilers, but we'll get there when we get there. And I spoke about the world building, and I think something that really helps with the world building in this game are the side quests, which I've heard a lot of discourse about, and to be honest, I can see both sides. So with the side quests, there's a good amount of side quests, and honestly the stories for the side quests are really where these side quests shine. They're very good at telling stories. I mean, some of them are obviously much better than others, but overall, I'd say the quality of the side quests are pretty good, at least as far as the story goes. But when it comes to gameplay, they are all pretty much the same thing with a couple of variations. More or less, you're either going to be talking to some NPCs and talking to some other NPCs after that NPC and then talking to another NPC. Or sometimes you're going to be talking to an NPC and then fighting some things and then talking to an NPC again. And that's pretty much all of the diversity of the side quests, which I think is definitely a weakness in the side quests for this game. I think the good thing about them is that they're definitely not mandatory. Obviously, they're called side quests, and you really don't have to do them if you don't care about the world building at all, but I do have to say I highly recommend doing them because they add so much to the world that the main story will kind of gloss over. Like, it's there, it's present, but the side quests really accentuate what's happening in the world, and it makes you really feel the stakes a lot more. The side quests do a lot to flesh out characters, main characters, side characters, all sorts of characters that you literally only talk to once. And I think a large part of my investment in this game was largely due to the side quests and all the people that I grew to care about so much by the end of the game. Like, when I first started playing this game, I thought the characters were they're okay, they're fine. They're nothing to write home about yet, but you know, I enjoy them for what they are. But gradually over time, I grew to really care and like these characters. It's kind of amazing because there's so many characters that I actually think are really cool and are like awesome, and I care about. I want to see more of them. And that, I feel like that's not usually the case in a lot of Final Fantasy games. Usually it sticks around to like the main party and maybe a couple other side NPCs, but man, a lot of the people that aren't even in your party can get really fleshed out, and they will have important and critical roles within the world, and of course, you know, sometimes in the main story as well. It's funny because when I first started writing some notes in my phone about just random things, I just wanted to highlight some things I might want to talk about, like characters, I wrote that they were kind of okay, and that was pretty early on in the game, but by the end, I feel far from okay and more like, wow. I actually care about these people. They're not people, but I feel like they are. I feel like they're real characters. Oh, and a side note, the content is pretty much fully voice acted. There's only like a couple snippets here and there that aren't voice acted, but pretty much everything has a voice, and I do gotta say the quality of the voice acting is really solid, and I think a big part of what really sold the characters to me. They're just a solid performances all around, and especially from the main character, Clive. He has absolutely some really stunning moments that I could really feel the emotion. I mean, in general, this game just made me feel so many things, so many emotions, so many feelings, and so many things I can't really talk about yet because that's spoilers. The story itself is pretty Final Fantasy on a surface level as well. I mean, we got the icons, we got crystals, we got chocobos. What else could you really want? That was a joke, by the way. Please don't kill me. But for real, without saying too much, I will say there are a lot of moments within the story that I thought, wow, this is about as Final Fantasy as it gets. But moving on from the world and the characters in the story, well, we do kind of have to talk about the gameplay of this game, because apparently it goes away from the long tradition of having Final Fantasy turn-based games, which is kind of weird, because the last game that was truly turn-based in the mainline Final Fantasy series was Final Fantasy X, which came out in like early 2000s, 2001, 2002, don't fact check me. If it isn't abundantly clear at this point, I think that people saying that this isn't a real Final Fantasy have no idea what they're talking about. They don't know either. They don't know what Final Fantasy is, or they didn't play the game. Like, I don't know. I don't know why people would be thinking this. I mean, Final Fantasy has always been a franchise that changed things up all the time. I mean, 10 was turn-based, but before that, they had the ATB system for a few games. 11 was an MMO. 12 was it was 12. 13 was probably the closest thing that we got to turn-based. 14's another MMO, and 15 was an action RPG. Like, what world am I living in where people think that Final Fantasy 16, just because it's an action RPG, is not a real Final Fantasy game? Like, I don't know. I'm digressing. I need to talk about the gameplay, which the battle system is phenomenal, I think. It's very well fleshed out. It's a lot of fun to use. There's so many abilities to switch from, and a lot of the abilities are pretty good. I found myself switching through a few as I gained them throughout the story, and I had a lot of fun experimenting. And outside the special abilities, there still are some other things that you can do in combat as well, like jump off of enemies, do a sky slam to the ground kind of thing, and big lunge stab and other stuff. Attack, magic, you get the deal. There's also the precision dodge, where when you dodge an attack at just the right timing, you can get a nice little slowdown effect, and you can get a counter in. It's very satisfying to pull off. And I say a lot of the mechanics within the game, like, you know, things that the boss is gonna do, like certain attacks, specific abilities, I think they were pretty well telegraphed, so it was easy to tell what was going on, and being able to react to that felt like you were learning the game and just getting better, which is always a nice feeling. Improvement's good. And now I've said all these great things about the battle system. I think it's great overall. The system itself is good, but I found the overall difficulty in the game kind of lacking, and that was one of my issues with the game. I found that a lot of the attacks were pretty easily telegraphed. Like, they gave you a lot of time, at least, especially in the beginning, a lot of time to react to some of these attacks, so you know, oh, this thing is going to do is swinging a sword above its head. I think it's probably going to swing it soon. And yes, the time that the attacks take do get faster over time as you progress through the game, but the problem with that is that you run into a lot of similar enemies over and over again. So while the attacks are getting faster, you've already seen a lot of these attacks before from another enemy. This largely extends to mid-boss fights, and especially if you do all the side content, you're gonna be fighting some of these guys like 6-7 times, and that's like actual real fights, not just including the ones that you'll just run into on the overworld, which can happen because some of those show up there as well. And I get it, this is definitely a very story-driven experience. I understand the developers wanting to create the game in a way where that the story comes first and that people will not struggle through the game and get discouraged so that they don't miss out on the whole expansive package. But there is a harder mode to this game that unlocks after beating the original. I haven't played it yet, so I'm hoping that it's going to be good. I'm going to be streaming it, by the way, at twitch.tv/probablymeechang, so if you want to check that out, just give me a follow over there. But I do kind of wish that there was some way to make the hard mode playable at the beginning of the game, because obviously, you know, I feel like most people who go into these games want to be challenged, especially with the action RPG genre. I feel like a lot of my fun within the game, at least as far as a gameplay standpoint goes, comes from me being challenged, and I did not feel a lot of that from the regular game and at the hardest mode that's available at the time of playing the game for the first time. Not to say it was a complete cakewalk by any chance, but I didn't really die during the main story at all. The only times that I kind of failed was during certain specific challenges where you have to do certain things in a certain time, and I mostly just ran out of time for those. But as far as the actual combat itself, I didn't find it that difficult. I don't know if it's just me as someone who's played a lot of Kingdom Hearts mostly, but you know, the action RPG genre. But I'm hoping that Final Fantasy mode, the hard mode, will deliver on the difficulty and give me the challenge I'm looking for. And if so, then this game is going to be even better than I am talking about right now. I just wish I had the ability to play that mode from the beginning, but seeing as how the hard mode works, because you start at level 50 and go to level 100 instead of starting from level 1. All your stuff carries over from the original playthrough, etc., whatever, I think. So I find it hard to believe that they're ever going to change this decision to be able to have the hard mode playable at the beginning, which I think is kind of a shame. Because, I mean, you can already change the difficulty in the game at any point, I think. Please don't be wrong about this. So even if people were really struggling, I feel like you could always just knock the difficulty down. But again, the game wasn't really balanced around for that idea to happen, so this is all just hypotheticals and, you know, wishful thinking, but you know, it is what it is. It's not the end of the world. Like I said, it wasn't a complete cakewalk. I still was like, you know, getting hit every once in a while, but it was definitely easier than I would have liked. Which, just to put it into perspective, it sounds like I'm pretty beat up about this, but this is one of my major gripes of the game, and overall, I think this is such a small nitpick in the grand scheme of things. And another thing I want to talk about is the level design, because at first, I was a little concerned. There was a lot of linear looking hallways, and it reminded me of, like, you know, the complaints that people have about Final Fantasy XIII, and I was starting to get a little worried. But never fear, the world does open up a bit more, and there is a decent amount to explore, and, you know, little goodies to find here and there. Nothing expansive to explore by any means. Definitely not an open world, but it's definitely a more closed-in experience with things to do every here and there, mostly connected to side quests and hunts. Like, you know, specific monsters that you have to find in the field. But for someone like me who gets overwhelmed by these expansive open world games, I felt like, you know, I still had my fun exploring, but I didn't feel like there was too much to look at to distract me from what's going on, because, I mean, that's just ADHD, man. Oh, and one other thing I wanted to bring up that I thought was really important, the active time lore. So, Final Fantasy is usually pretty known for having a lot of convoluted, like, extravagant stories with a lot going on, and to be honest, Final Fantasy XVI is no different. I wouldn't say maybe convoluted. Take out the convolutedness, it's still got a little bit of convolutedness, but you know, it's Final Fantasy, it's a fantasy game. You gotta suspend your disbelief a little bit. So there's going to be a lot of characters and like regions and just things that the story might just kind of gloss over, not explain super in depth, just, you know, for the sake of the storytelling, because I think that going out of your way to explain some of these things would definitely hinder the storytelling and the process of getting all the information across. So that's what the active time lore is, which at any point during the game, behold the touchpad on the PlayStation controller, you'll open up basically little tiny articles that will show relevant information to characters, settings, and events that are relevant to what is happening at that time. So there is a little bit of reading involved, and I think it does add a bit to the story, and I know some people will complain about the reading aspect of it, but I do think that having it in a concise spot where you know exactly what you need to know at that time, I think it's really helpful to people that are really struggling to keep up with the story, because I've heard some complaints about that as well. Even some points for me personally, I was just kind of like, I'm a little lost at who's who and where we are, especially mostly in the beginning of the game, but very quickly you will know this world if you're paying attention even a little bit, and you will get invested. Oh, and how can I forget about the music? The music was overall very, very good. I really thoroughly enjoyed the boss battle themes as well as the regular battle theme, and the locale's more ambient, or like, I guess, atmospheric original soundtracks, they're also very good as well. And I feel like specifically in some of the more emotional, heartfelt cutscenes, that the music did a fantastic job at really amplifying those emotions. I definitely let the music set the mood in my mind, and I'm already like, oh god, this is terrible. Oh god, what's happening on screen is even more terrible. Why? Why do you do this, music? But overall, I'd say music, very solid. I don't know if I'd put it in like my top favorite soundtracks of all time, but either way, I think it did a really good job and I really liked it. Overall, those are my general thoughts on Final Fantasy XVI. In conclusion, I think it's a real Final Fantasy game, and I think if you are interested in Final Fantasy at all, have been a fan of any of the games, or even if you're not, I highly recommend checking it out. It's definitely a reason to own a PS5 at the moment. I literally bought a PS5 just for this game, and I personally have no regrets. And on top of the whole thing, I think the conversation of what is a real Final Fantasy game is kind of dumb to begin with. At the end of the game, a game is a game. I've heard some people say it's a good game but a bad Final Fantasy game, but what does that even really mean? People will like the game or people will dislike the game. That's just how it is. And, you know, I think putting a reason of, oh, it's not Final Fantasy enough is kind of a weird reason to dismiss the game like that, but that's just me. But now I'm going to talk about more story, spoiler-specific things, so if you are looking to play this game blind, now's your time to leave, and I'll give you a little bit minute to, you know, pack your things up. You're probably already exited the video, but I'm also going to give this time to, you know, remind you to give a like and subscribe on the channel. It would really help support me a lot, and I would appreciate it greatly. Alright, but now we're going to talk about more specifics about Final Fantasy XVI. Just in case, I will be talking about literally anything and everything that I've seen from beginning to end in the main story, side quests, or otherwise. So first of all, I played the demo. I played the demo first, and yeah, it's pretty fucked up. Because your little brother, Joshua, he dies right at the very beginning. I honestly, I kind of thought that something like that might happen, but I wasn't sure, and it was really brutal. The way that Ifrit really tore Phoenix apart, I felt that. I was just like, Jesus Christ. Like, I mean, I expected things like this to happen in a game. It's an M-rated Final Fantasy game, and Final Fantasy is usually pretty fucked up, but even I was just like taken aback. I was like, oh my god, Jesus Christ, man. And of course, as we all know, Josh was not dead. He lived somehow, you know, don't question it. And I feel like the beginning really did a good job of setting the tone of how this game was going to be, because you see Clive in the beginning as this, like, you know, he's just a guy. I mean, yeah, I guess he's in the noble house, so he's not just a guy. But personality-wise, he's just a guy. He wants to be, you know, the anime protagonist of this world. Yeah, I fight for my country and my brother, and everyth's good. And I just want to do my family proud and be a shield of Rosaria. And my god, how quickly that the whole dream just dies. And then you have this older, grizzled, 28-ish-year-old Clive, I think, who's been doing nothing but fighting and killing for an empire that he doesn't want to be a part of, and just wants to avenge his brother, which, you know, we'll get to that in a second, I'm sure. He's kind of a blank slate at the beginning. I didn't feel particularly attached to him, but, you know, after learning the extent of what he went through as a child, it became more understandable as I got to see his character. And as the game goes on, you definitely see that character develop a lot more. Because I'll be honest, I was just very meh on Clive for a good while, until I kind of tried to understand him a little bit more. And as the game progressed, he definitely had more of a personality, but I think it makes sense. But definitely at the time, it felt a little weird. But I'm glad that my problems and issues with Clive in the beginning have they've disappeared by the end of the game. And then of course we have Jill, the romantic interest slash longtime party member of the team. I think she's a good character. I think she definitely has her moments where she shines, but I think a lot of her character revolves around Clive. Like, a lot of it is her connection to Clive, which, you know, is fine to have, I think. Personally, I think there's a lot more that could have been done with Jill, especially towards the end of the game. Because after the point where she gives the Shiva powers to Clive, it feels like they kind of were like, well, you can, you're no longer as useful anymore, so you can be pushed off to the side. Don't get me wrong, when I saw Jill at the end of the game, oh my god, even just thinking about it, tears, man, just tears. Like, that hit me when I saw Jill look into the sky and she sees the red star disappear. I don't remember the star name. And the way she runs off, she just knows. Gav knows. It was really sad, and I cried. I tried really hard to hold back the tears, but by the end I was like, God damn it, man. Why? But I'm getting ahead of myself. We're not even close to talking about that yet. And then we have Sid. I almost forgot to bring up Sid because he died so early. But Sid was a very cool character. I love Sid. I love how you can see his influence on Clive. One, throughout the time that Sid and Clive interact with each other, but you can see a lot more in the future after the time skip. I see a lot of Sid's influence on Clive. You can see how he's matured and taken the role of Sid as his own and kind of, I guess, grown into the role. But enough about Clive, we're talking about Sid here. He's a great character. He was fun to have around. He was the first character that I really was like, okay, yeah, that's a Final Fantasy character for sure. He was always really fun to have on screen, and I definitely shed a few tears when he finally passed away. Although I knew it was coming from a mile away because I was like, there's no way they can keep pretending to kill Sid after all this time without it getting old. I was already starting to get a little old for me by the time by the go around where I think he was gonna fall off the bridge. I think in the last city. I think that was the last time they did that. Oh yeah, we've been talking about characters. How could I forget about Torgal? You know, having Torgal in the game, I feel like amplified my love for the game so much more than it could have been without Torgal. Like, always having Torgal around, I mean, at least most of the time having Torgal around, it just felt like, you know, you have your friend here, your boy, that you just, you know, you bring on your adventure with you, and you talk to him. Clive is so cute with Torgal. Like, honestly, like, he's always this man. I'm Clive Rossfield, and I talk like this. Not really, but, you know, but he's like, come here, Torgal. Come here, boy. We're going off on an adventure, aren't we? I have a terrible impression. Forgive me. And yes, the Torgal side quest absolutely destroyed me. My God, I was just like, Torgal, you looked for me for so long. He's a good boy. And also the fact that he's apparently some frost wolf that absorbs the powers of icons around him, so he's also fire, lightning, and ice. And that's pretty cool. Torgal is overall a very good boy. And oh god, I don't even want to think about how Torgal reacted to Clive's death. Don't even get me started. I'm skipping all over the place because I don't have any train of thought of what's happening here. But I also have to talk about the part where press L3 and R3 to accept the truth. When I say I was beyond hyped for this part in particular, because the music kicks up, the limit break gauges fill up, and as I saw that and my eyes lit up, I'm like, I know what this means. I know what's about to happen. I played Final Fantasy XIV. Combined with the fact that you're fighting your shadow version of yourself, the dark truth that you're trying to combat and hide away from. Seeing Clive take the Ifrit form, just to kind of do a Godzilla battle between double Ifrits, and then just kabam, the slash to kill him. And of course, you have to line up the music. I've watched this cutscene. I've watched this part a bunch of times by now. But while we're on the topic, let's talk about icon battles, because I feel like a lot of the icon battles were so mechanically boring, but I will forgive it just because of how cinematic the boss fights actually are. It's funny to think about how much I like the Ifrit part, when in reality that's probably one of the weaker boss fights as far as like, you know, the cinemaness of it. I do at least appreciate that the more like, you know, I feel like the more mechanically intensive fights are kind of with regular Clive, and then you go into the more cinematic battle with the icons, which I can appreciate because at least, you know, it feels like it's more of an experience than a boss fight, which is, I guess, kind of, I don't know how I feel about that entirely. I think it's more good than bad. I do kind of have my gripes with the quick time events, but not for the reason you might think. I either think they should have either not done them or gone in harder with them, because there were so many times I'm like, man, I wish I could have been interacting with this, like, yeah, give every punch that I see Ifrit give to Ifrit, like, give me a square, give me another square. But then, at least I thought that in the beginning, but as the game went on and I started to see more of these fights, I'm like, I can see why they didn't do that, but I kind of wish that they would have put, I guess, more quick time events, or I guess not at all. I do at least appreciate that them having an infrequent amount was kind of like keeping me on my toes. I was like always had my hands on my controller. I was always like ready and like engaged. So I guess the game does at least do a good job of keeping me engaged, I suppose. You know, maybe I should also talk about some of the villains, like Benedicta. She was cool. Cool is probably not the right word for that. What I mean to say is that I think Benedicta as a villain, she was fun to hate. She was despicable, murderous, and maybe I could still fix her. And then we have Kupka, the Titan himself, who was just a very angry man. I also enjoyed having him as a villain because he was invested in making sure that everyone paid for the death of Benedicta. Dude, when we cut off his hands, I was like, oh my god, he's gonna be pissed. I also thought he was gonna die in that part, but you know, that's another story. Moving on to the Titan fight, I guess, since we're talking about Kupka, that was really fucking cool. I remember jamming out to the music. I remember hearing about in an article how Soken was asked to make a classical piece, and instead came out with something completely different. I heard it was the Titan fight, so I was a little spoiled on that. But either way, I was jamming. It was, and just one, Titan being so huge and making Ifrit feel so small. It was just a wild thing to watch, because you're just this little tiny demon monster crawling up this arm and tentacles of this giant earth guy and trying to beat the shit out of him when you're like literally 1,000th of his size. So again, as far as like I said before, cinema, cool. Fight itself, I guess I'm mostly gonna keep this discussion, the in-depth discussion about the dominance, and more group all the other characters together, because if we do each individual character, I'm gonna be here all day. Next, we had the Bahamut fight, which was of course Dion, which, yeah, they threw in the gay romance in there, and I was honestly very shocked by that. I don't know, and it was so nonchalant about it. I was just like, you know what? Good for you, Final Fantasy. I also saw complaints online about people saying that they didn't commit enough, and I'm like, well, what more did you really want? They just kind of treated it like a normal relationship, just as it should be, right? And as for Dion, I actually really liked his character. I thought for sure in the beginning that he was definitely going to be some bad guy that we had to fight down the line, but you know, Joshua came through, talked some sense into him, and he was fighting for the good guys. So, you know, that's always cool. How could I forget about talking about Joshua? Joshua, you know, the whole reason that Clive was trying to live for a while. Oh yeah, we kind of completely gloss over the fact that Clive finds out that he's the one who maybe killed Joshua, and he starts to hate himself. Oh my god, well, how did I gloss over that? So yeah, imagine killing for 13 years, just to hold on to the hope that maybe one day you can avenge your brother, only to find out that you're the one who did it to begin with. But you know, Joshua, he was a faithful brother. Here's another character that I liked, but I also feel like that my attachment to him also came from his connection to Clive. Because you can see very much how deeply they care for each other. The connection between the two is definitely a strong point between them. But I feel like that's a large part of what they have, even though they spend a lot of time apart. There's definitely very much a theme of, yes, the connections around you are important. Which I have heard complaints about the whole Kingdom Hearts nonsense, and while I can definitely see the argument for the Kingdom Hearts nonsense, it's also just Final Fantasy nonsense. This kind of shit just has always been in Final Fantasy, I feel. Maybe not quite as like, you know, my friends are my power as this was, but you know, it's still been there. It's been present, for sure. Oh yeah, but can we talk about the Bahamut fight? Just how crazy that was. I remember thinking during the fight, like, We fucking teleported to space. We got Bahamut casting some crazy Zeta 5000 flare. Everything is blowing up. This is really cool. And it's just some random mid-boss. Oh my god, I'm bouncing around so much. But yes, Odin. Yeah, the King Barnabas himself. He was an interesting villain. I still don't know what he had going on with his mom exactly, but I'm sure that there's a lot to unpack there. He was definitely a very formidable foe. You could feel his presence and just how powerful he was. I felt scared to go up against him. I'm like, oh god, it's Odin. Like, the whole time I'm thinking, this game is not that hard, but I still feel fear in my heart. I'm like, we gotta take on this guy? Jesus. And then there's the Odin fight, which I also thought was just really cool, just a really nice set piece with the rain and with the darkness and the glowing blades. I mean, that's just Odin's thing, I guess. And it was nice to finally beat him after getting the, the original get our ass beat, and then we kind of get our ass beat but do a little better, and then of course the eventual we kill Odin. Man, that dude was really crazy in general to kind of go along with Ultima's, I guess, vision of trying to survive and trying to believe that he had a place in this world that Ultima envisioned. I don't know, maybe he did. Maybe Ultima wasn't such a bad guy after all. Who knows? Oh, and I said I was only going to talk about Dominus, but we do have to talk about Clive's mom, Annabella, real quick, because holy shit, what a bitch. I really, really didn't like her, which, obviously a good thing to have in a villain because she was so cold, she was so heartless, that, like, she did so many awful things, and she just didn't really care. She didn't seem to show any care whatsoever. She had no remorse. Even in her death, she thought that everything was going so poorly that it had to be a nightmare. There's no way that it was real, and she killed herself. I was really hoping that it was going to be some brutal murder, like Clive is just like, you need to atone for your sins or something, fucking just murders her or something. But the way it worked out, it works too. It wouldn't really be in Clive's character to do that anyways, but I'm just saying, she deserved it. Which then leaves us with Ultima, the ultimate bad guy, which his presence was shown out intermittently throughout the game. You knew that he was going to be the big bad at the end. But I don't know, for me personally, Ultima is just some guy that wanted to be a god, and he did just that, I guess, and it worked against him. Like, I understand his motivations and all, and he's definitely got some interesting things to say and thought-provoking sentences, but overall, I was kind of meh on Ultima. He doesn't take away from the story in the grand scheme of things, I think. But I think he was, at least for me personally, it's one of the weaker points in the story. I guess he's the bad guy. He wanted to live. He wants to. All of humanity was just a pawn for him to survive and create this world that he can live in. But that's cool and all. But his on-screen presence was just still kind of meh, because he had that we will talk like this, and we will go blah, 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 blah. I don't care, man. No, that could just be my bad opinion. Please let me know how bad my opinions are in the comment section down below. And then, of course, we have the climactic battle with Ultima at Origin. Well, that whole thing, that was a roller coaster of emotions to just... wow, it's just eye candy. It was just the whole, every bit of it was just a spectacle to watch. I know I've been saying the word spectacle a lot, but it really is what this game is. Everyone getting their asses kicked in the beginning with, obviously the icon fights. It was a little cheesy, but you know what? Like I said, the cinema makes up for the whole thing. It's more of just an interactive experience, I guess, which, I can see might be a turnoff for some, but I liked it. But, oh god, the actual Ultima fight where he fights Clive, that was definitely my favorite fight in the game. At least on a mechanical level. I mean, it definitely did have a lot of pizzazz to it, where you had to fight Phoenix with Phoenix, Garuda and Garuda, etc., etc. That being the abilities between Clive and Ultima, of course. The fact that the final theme was Find the Flame, more, I don't even know how to explain it, I guess more varied version of Find the Flame, which I was already loving the song, and that was definitely the song that I was listening to the most from the game. And when it was playing as the final boss theme, I was like, yes, This is what I wanted. I didn't know I wanted it, but I did want it. And how Clive essentially says to Ultima at the end, this is not your Final Fantasy. I was grinning like an idiot during that part. I said, oh no, out loud. It was like, oh god, he actually went there. But like, fuck it, the moment was hype. I was into it. Alright, but let's talk about some of these icon abilities while I'm talking about just random Final Fantasy XVI things, because I have no real train of thought to follow. I really experimented around with all the icons. Let's see. So I mostly used Phoenix, Garuda, and Odin by the end. I really found the fire, teleport, shift, strike thing to be really useful in general, as well as me using the Rising Flames ability, and my god, the savior of my game, the Will of the Wykes. That ability is absolutely broken. It does extra damage, it takes hits for you, and it's got a relatively short cooldown for how long it lasts. I could basically just use it on cooldown, and I would only have like maybe 8 to 10 seconds in between cooldowns where I wouldn't have any Will of the Wykes going. It also does make parrying a lot easier, because you can just Will of Wykes an attack and just hopefully get that right timing, because it seems like that precision time, or that timing, is pretty precise. I also used Garuda for the takedown during the half stagger phase. I felt that was very important and useful for getting a lot more damage during the mid stagger point. Though to be honest, I didn't really use any of Garuda's abilities by the end of the game. I did use the aerial blast, the giant cyclone thing, because one, it was really funny just to see all the enemies go and just have that noise layered over and over again each other as they're struggling to get out of the tornado, and you can just hit them while they're in there. It's free real estate. And then I did mess with Titan for a little bit, but I found myself not really using the block as much as I wanted to. I feel like if I did try to incorporate it to my play more, that I would be more keen on using it, but for the most part I just found myself dodging, and I mostly only blocked when I felt like I wanted to get the block, because it's just cool to get the precision guard or whatever it's called. I did use that wind-up ability because it does great damage, especially during stagger windows, and I made sure to pop that on Garuda because I wasn't really using any Garuda abilities by the end. And then we have Ramuh, which has the weird little shot lock thing from Kingdom Hearts as its like main ability. I was not a fan of that. It just did not feel good to use. It was kind of clunky. It slowed down everything, which is fine, but like I did not enjoy using it, so I very quickly switched that off as soon as I had the ability to. But I did like using the Judgment Bolt, and I forgot what the other one is. A single target lightning strike. I think it's just called like lightning bolt or something like that. Just for some damage. I think I did get rid of the lightning bolt one. Just did the Judgment Bolts by the end, just because massive damage, and I just like electricity. It's cool. I did also like that orb that you send out where you hit it and it will like electrocute enemies around you, because it did pretty decent damage. And I feel like in combination with the Will of the Wykes, it was pretty cool to have, but I didn't actually personally have my, that combo myself, but I did mess with it a little bit just to see how it is, but I ultimately did not go with that combo in my actual playthrough. I mostly just played around with it. Then we have Bahamut, which for the most part, I didn't really like any of his abilities at all. This is the only icon that I was like, I don't really like this. I don't know, the Mega Flare thing, it wasn't really that interactive for me, because you kind of just move around and dodge stuff, which I mean, it's kind of cool, and you get that precision dodge to level up the thing faster. But I also didn't really like any of his additional abilities, so I didn't end up using them outside of when I had to during the trials of Bahamut. Then with Shiva's abilities, I didn't really mess too much around with those either. I did like the dodge thing, the speed boost that you can also use to kind of freeze the enemies around, but I ended up preferring later options, which is Odin, but I did use Shiva until I did get Odin. I also did eventually swap out the aerial blast that I talked about before for the Diamond Dust, because I liked how much stagger that it did, and it was just useful to have overall, and I think it was a slightly faster cooldown, if I'm not mistaken. And then, of course, Odin gets Zantetsuken, which I was like, why would I not want to use that? That move is fucking cool as shit. Especially getting those level 5 Zantetsuken. It's so satisfying. I mean, I get it. It's mostly just basically like a room kill for a lot of things. But either way, I never get tired of the animation. It's sick. And I liked all of Odin's abilities pretty equally. The one I ended up using was I can't remember the name of it. Whatever. It's one of the slashy things that levels up the Zantetsuken. It's one of them. But the rift thing that interrupts the animation, that was also hella useful when I was doing the Trials of Odin. That was where I guess the trials were basically where I got most of my mileage out of these abilities. Transitioning to that, I also did really like the trials because in some cases it was like, yeah, this is a test of how well you know these abilities, and in some other cases it was, hey, it's a test of how fast can you learn these abilities on the fly, because I didn't use a lot of these abilities, especially like I said with Bahamut. I think Shiva was also one where I kind of learned all of the abilities on the fly as well as Odin, but I feel like most of Odin's attacks were kind of self-explanatory outside of the Rift Jump, which was also not that hard to figure out on its own either. I'm excited to see the Final Fantasy mode version of these trials, if they're any different at all, and maybe it'll force me to mix things up a little bit more, we'll see. Yeah, overall, I do like the abilities in this game, and I feel like it can cater to a bunch of different kinds of playstyles. I know that people I talk to use completely different sets than me, so let me know what sets you use in the comment section below. I feel like I've said so many things about making comments, but will anybody actually make those comments? Only you can decide. But backtracking a little bit, Joshua died, that's right, and so did Dion. I don't know why I'm smiling while saying that. But yeah, Dion dies a tragic hero's death. I guess I didn't get quite as attached to him. I mean, I guess he didn't really have as much of a connection to Clive. I guess it's really my connection to Clive that's really carrying I guess all the character interactions for me personally. Like I said, it's funny to think that how at the beginning of the game I just felt very mad about Clive, and by the end I'm just like, yeah, this guy is the hero. This is the guy that it's him. Clive is him. You can tell he has a passion for what he's fighting for. He just wants to fight for a world where you can live and die by your own terms, where you're not just being forced to walk through life that you don't want to live, where you can choose to do as you wish. And to be honest, I wish the real world were a little bit more like that. By that I mean sometimes you just have to do things in life that you don't really want to do, and it kind of sucks, but we have to because of the way that the world is, and I think that there are some ways that the world could definitely be better. But real world issues in my Final Fantasy, that's never been a thing, right? But yes, the Joshua death, it really got me when Clive was screaming out for Joshua. I really felt that. I was definitely tearing up at that moment, and you could the feelings, man. This game just made me feel so many things. And remember, I was already tearing at the point where like Clive had just discovered Joshua's body, but then he comes back and he's sad all over again. He's triumphant over Ultima. He's finished off the big bad, and then he remembers that not all is completely gravy. Not everything's good in the world. Joshua's gone, and man, then they showed the cutscene of them as kids, and I was just like, you didn't have to do this. We didn't have to go here. I would have been sad enough without this. And here we are making me feel extra emotions, more context. I mean, of course I want it, but like, I didn't need it. Do I really need to know? Am I supposed to be cursed with this knowledge now? And then, like I briefly mentioned it before, we also see Clive on the beach at the end. The magic is gone, no longer has the power of the dominance, and his body very quickly turned into stone from the curse of the bearers. And it seems that there's speculation online whether he lives or not. I thought I understood it as him being dead. I didn't read too much more into it. I was just like, no man, it's I guess his chapter is over. Like, that's all there is to it. Like I didn't see a reason for why they would try to keep him alive. If they implied that he could have died at all, I feel like it'd be weird for him to live that, because I feel like especially with the fact that with him having his brother gone, like Joshua was like a big reason for him to be around and live and have purpose in his life. And I guess Jill kind of also, I would think would be that, but I mean, I don't know. Like I said, it was not exactly in his control to begin with. He didn't exactly want to die, but I think it was something that had to happen. And usually I'm very torn about these like sad endings that like were like, it's not a completely happy ending. And usually I find it kind of like weird or off-putting, or like, because like maybe some things don't conclude, but this felt right. This didn't feel forced. This didn't feel like hammed in. It felt like the true conclusion to Clive Rossfield dying for something he truly believed in. It seems with the epilogue that perhaps they at least got a good piece of something that Clive was striving for. And also, like, I guess people are saying that Joshua definitely also died. Upon my initial finishing of the game, I kind of understood it as Clive still had Ultima's power when he healed Joshua, so maybe he was able to live and pen that book at the end. But I guess a lot of people are saying he's dead, and that someone else may have taken up the moniker, or like at least gotten the information from him, maybe Yote. How have we not even talked about Yote? We'll get to her in a second. Regardless, I'm just being the stupid hopeful here, but I want to believe that maybe Joshua lives, maybe, and was able to, I don't know, bring some joy somehow in telling the stories of his brother and making the legend live on. Who knows? Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below, because God knows I'm no media expert. I don't know media literacy. I know I've kind of briefly mentioned this in the beginning part of the video, but yeah, the world is really fucked up with the way that they treat their bearers. Obviously, you know, they're supposed to be the slaves. It's they're not treated with very high regard. I remember the quest that particularly got me was with the one with the dad was like, hey, you gotta go save my boy from this wolf. And obviously, you know, it seems incredibly suspicious that the way that he's acting, not really concerned for his boy, considering that he might die from a wolf supposedly. You go there, you kill the wolf, and he's like, you killed my pet, and there's dead bearers everywhere. You're like, you guys just do this for fun? Like, that's really fucked up. Like, I was just like, Jesus Christ. Like, I kind of saw it coming, but still, I'm still kind of surprised. There's just so much of this world that I feel like I've kind of glossed over, but I feel like, I mean, what more is there to say? The Blight's terrible, everything's grim, slavery's bad, everyone needs to come together and fight against the greater evil. Like, I don't know what I can say really more that isn't really implied, other than, you know, it sucks. It's rough out there. Oh yeah, I said I was going to talk about Yote. She's great. I love her. She was a good attendant to Joshua, and obviously very caring. I kind of wish she got more screen time. I feel like not that she didn't get a lot of screen time, she got a decent amount, but I wanted more with her personally. But to be honest, that can really be said about pretty much everybody in the Hideaway, because, I mean, we got a lot of great moments with a lot of the characters, especially characters like Gav and Otto. Oh yeah, there's so many side characters that, like, shine. I can't even mention all of them. Like, Uncle Byron, Karen, Blackthorn. I honestly did not expect to care as much about Blackthorn as I did. The side quests are just kind of crazy, because he's just, like, this grumpy old man, but then he'll see, like, this fine piece of leather, and he's just like, I don't know how I can make that. Like, it blows my mind, and now I'm depressed. It's just so weird, but, like, I understand wanting to perfect the craft, so I could relate to that. I've never been to the point where I saw something that was like, that's so good I'm depressed, but, like, you know, I get the idea, I suppose. I did really like Gav as well. I mean, he was also one of the first characters that after Sid that I really liked as a character to begin with. I mean, how can I forget about Mid? Of course, Sid's daughter. She's great. I don't really have much more to say. She's spunky, she's got a lot of pep in her step, and she adds a lot of life to the scenes that she's in. Definitely a lot of energy, that's for sure, that it feels like most people are, like, old and just like, we've been through some shit. She's like, alright guys, we're gonna go build this mithril engine, and it's gonna take this piece and that piece, and you're already gonna do the job for me. Yeah, like I said before, pretty much all the side characters I cared about a decent amount. But yeah, there's a lot of characters in the Hideaway. I can't even think to name all of them outside of it. And then there's even characters that aren't at the Hideaway that are really cool. Martha, Isabella, Lubor, just to name a few. I really liked Lubor. I thought that guy was cool. Like I said, there's so many names. I can't even think to name all of them. I feel like I've been talking for over an hour and a half at this point. This is going on forever. I think I might just call it here, because there's too many things to say, and I feel like I've said most of the important things, right? I probably didn't. I probably glossed over some very important things, but you know what? You can let me know in the comment section down below. Now, if you've stuck around for this, however long this rant ends up being, I want to say thank you, and I appreciate it a lot that sticking through whatever this goddamn mess of thoughts is. And remember, if you liked the video, hit that like button, and be sure to subscribe if you haven't for all sorts of different content, including Final Fantasy and Final Fantasy 16 included. And until next video, I've been Mii-Chang, and I'll see you. Clive? Clive? Ah, Clive. It's Clive. Clive Rosefield. I'm a Shield of Rosaria. Clive. Clive.